Hank Nuwer has written two different versions of a play about a young man who dies in an alcohol fueled initiation. In one version, the youth is a fraternity pledge. In this play, Death of a Rookie, it is a freshman ball player who perishes. Many of the lines in the play come from Hank's interviews with families who lost a son in a hazing incident. This play was first acted by Hank Nuwer after he was selected as an Anne Frank Fellowship winner at Buffalo State College. It has been performed as a reading by Hank for athletes at the University of Cincinnati, Franklin College, and at a California high school. Without further ado, the one-man play begins. The time is the present. The place is the farmhouse bedroom of Luke, newly dead in a hazing incident. Luke's grandfather enters the room.
I'll try to keep my voice down. My daughter-in-law is asleep in the bedroom upstairs. We put her son, my grandson, into the ground yesterday. We buried Luke in the family plot here on our farm. He's got good company. His daddy, my son John, is there. John died in Afghanistan fighting for people like you. It would have destroyed John to know that his boy is gone, especially the way Luke died. Lots of other company there to comfort him. His grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. My wife June, who died while giving birth to John. This farm has belonged to our family since before the Civil War. Luke was proud of our history. He planned to run this farm for me after graduation. That's why he double majored in business and science. Also in the family plot rests my sister Rose. Maybe Luke is introducing himself right now. Rose was 7 and playing in the hayloft long ago. She saved the pup, but lost her balance and went over the side. My daddy was below with a pitchfork and mucking out the horse stalls. He heard a crack loud as a car crash. It was Rose's head hitting concrete. My mama and father never got over Rose's death. Now I guess I'm to know what something like that feels like. A man doesn't expect to outlive his son and grandson, you know? Oh, shoot. I can hear my daughter-in-law walking upstairs. I got a loud voice, and that's a blessing and a curse. I used to be the umpire at Luke's Little League baseball games. One time he hit the ball way out of the park. It got me so excited that I shouted home run, but signaled foul ball. Well, Luke and the catcher are at home plate looking at me. Which is it, Grandpa? Luke yelled, fair or foul? Well, Luke, I said, you heard me say home run, but all those folks in the stands saw me call it a foul. I guess it's just not your day. Oh, he was upset, I tell you, but at least I made the catcher happy. One time Luke's in the utility room and he takes a bat and he says, look at my batting stance, Grandpa. He holds it high like this and bam, he knocks out an overhead bulb. What did you do? I said. I just showed you my stance like this, he says. Bam! Another light. I stood there in the dark, sloshing glass in my coffee cup. My daughter-in-law walked in and caught us giggling like goofballs. His mother brought Luke into this world right here in this room. His mom is old school and enlisted a midwife to deliver him. She wrapped him in this quilt that she made all by herself. Darn near took her 9 months to make it. She put in every stitch with love. You're probably wondering who I blame for Luke's death. His baseball team? The school? The administration? No. The fact is I blame myself. If I acted more like his grandfather and less like his pal, riding dirt bikes and telling each other corny jokes. I wish I could return Luke to his mama's womb and get a start as a role model all over again. Raised him right and strict, like my pa reared me. I was his grandfather. I should have acted like I was. The thing is, before last week, I would have told you I'd done my best. I tried to prepare him in every way for college. Bought his books from the bookstore a week before his classes started. Paid for this really stinking sociology text that Professor Boggs wrote himself and made all the kids buy for $279. The one that had 30 pages printed upside down and had more errors than the Chicago Cubs could make. Luke said that Boggs should have worn a mask to class when he held everyone up. My daughter gave me a job today. She wants me to pick out a headstone and put something on it besides Luke's name. So I go down this morning to the stone carver shop. What do people write on those? I asked the man. What's in your heart? He says. He never screwed up once and it killed him, I say. He had all the freaking potential in the world, but look where that got him. He gives me a pained look. You can't put something like that on a sacred stone, he says. No? Do I sound bitter? I ask the salesman. He nods. He looks afraid. Well, I am bitter. One day I'm reading a postcard from Luke asking if I could deposit money in his bank account for a new pair of baseball spikes. Next day, I'm picking out a casket. I talk to the salesman. Luke Samuel Lysak, 2002 to 2020. Well, that much I got down in my head to put on the headstone. I tell him I'll come back when I got the rest. Jeez, what could Luke and Rose be talking about in heaven? I'm thinking of them both up there, but can't bring myself to pray. Even back in church, I couldn't bring myself to pray. I had to be strong for my daughter-in-law sitting beside me in the pew. I tried concentrating on the flowers, but it was hard, I tell you, to keep the tears held back inside. When I listened to his buddies from high school come up one at a time, I love the story one kid told about how Luke and his other buddies tried to build a boat. They worked in my shop up in the barn and used my power saw and tools. Came the big day to christen the boat out at the lake. Luke bought a bottle of energy drink and cracked it against the side of the boat. They pushed off. The dang boat sunk like a rock. They had furnished the boat with stuff from my barn, oil lanterns, a cook stove, kitchen utensils, all gone to the bottom. I pretended to be mad, but I thought it was a good lesson for Luke and his friends. Ask before you take something. The preacher told everyone that God asks us to do hard things. I wanted to scream from my pew. Where was God the night Luke died? But it wouldn't have been right. I'm ashamed having to tell you, I thought that, Lord. I know you are with me in the Spirit, and it's not for me to question your purpose. I'd like to think that Luke might have learned a lesson from his last night on earth. That is, if he had lived. How alcohol is a poison if you slug down enough of it. What did his roommate tell me at the funeral home? That he and the other rookies consumed a bottle of whiskey each at first, second, third, and home? What Einstein came up with that screwball plan? I can't believe one teammate said, hey guys, this isn't a great idea. The roommate told me 2 other rookies went to the hospital that night. They had their stomachs pumped in emergency. They were lucky. But they and the others have learned a lesson. Too bad that lesson comes at Luke's expense. When Luke went off to school last August and said he wanted to play ball, his mother asked if I thought he might have to go through hazing. No, I said, that stuff happens only in the military. Lord, do I know different now. The internet is full of horror stories. One researcher said there's been at least 1 death a year, and sometimes many more deaths since 1959 in the colleges. I should have researched this back when my daughter asked me that question. The research says 80% of the hazing deaths involve drinking. The others die of beatings, drownings, and road accidents during scavenger hunts or kidnappings. Crazy, right? And it's not just sports teams. It's fraternities, it's sororities, bands, high school church groups. You send your kid off someplace you think is safe, and then you bury him? If our schools are no longer safe, then no place is safe. You see all this stuff in Luke's room. My daughter-in-law wants me to leave the room just as it always was. I don't know about that. It's painful to see everything as he left it. I know one thing for sure. Me and my daughter didn't want to pick up stuff from the college. Pack it up and ship it to me, I says to that coach when he showed up at the hospital after we closed Luke's eyes. Coach, I shouted at him then and there. What in blazes kind of coaching did you give Luke that done him any good? Old Luke, old Tramp, Luke's dog, hasn't left his vigil atop the loose earth over Luke's grave all day. Luke was 5 when we gave him a pup. Those two ran the fields from sunup to sundown. One time, Tramp ran into a rattler on our farm's back 40 acres. The vet wanted to put Tramp down, but Luke would have none of it. The vet stayed. Luke sat with him and with the dog's head on his lap the whole night. Tramp pulled through. Once Luke got to college, he missed Tramp so bad. He talked his mom and me into letting him take the dog into the apartment house where the baseball players lived. Luke said Tramp used to visit all the guys' rooms every night. It was as if the old dog didn't want to hurt anyone's feelings. At the wake, one of the rookies brought Tramp to the funeral home. Just walked in with him on a leash. That dog can't stay, this funeral director says. Oh, yes, he can, I says. I walked Tramp over to the casket and let him lick Luke's hands. The dog began to tremble, and then he just let out one long, sorrowful sigh as he lay down in front of the casket. Just like right now, he's out near the orchard. Won't come off Luke's grave even to eat. I had to put water and food out there for Tramp. A couple of the boys there hugged Tramp, and they cried and they cried. I remember when I bought Luke a set of weights. One day I said to him, "How much can you lift?" Quick as a button, he winks and says, 10 pounds more than you, Grandpa. He was the most competitive kid I know. If someone did 100 sit-ups, he'd do 101. Competitive? Yes, he was. Maybe too competitive. He was trying to show those guys how much he wanted to belong. If he was going to drink with them, he was going to outdrink them. The coroner said he'd never treated anyone with so much alcohol in his body. Luke drowned in his own fluids. You see, the trouble was, Luke wasn't a drinker. The only thing I keep in the house is brandy, and that's a flu remedy. I saw too many guys in the service drink away their careers. Maybe if I had talked to him a little more about alcohol, maybe he'd still be there. Oh, don't go there. Driving myself crazy I am. The doctor said that if Luke had been a serious drinker, he'd still be alive. Just had no tolerance for it. This morning, I walked a few steps in Luke's shoes. I know it's crazy, but I had to wear them. Walk in Luke's shoes, so to speak. He had big feet like mine, inherited them from me. Size 14s, big as Gilligan's SS Minnow. Luke was always crazy about the New York Yankees, but when he was in the 4th grade, someone told him about their rivalry with Boston. He made me buy him a Red Sox cap and a Yankees t-shirt. Who are you for when those two teams play? I asked him. Well, I'm for whoever's winning, Grandpa, of course, he said with this big wink. I picked up his ball cap at the emergency room. His mother and I got the call when we were in the kitchen about 5 in the morning. I was up, of course. That's life on a farm. Cows to milk, hogs to feed, chickens need their grain. Then there's always something to fix. I never could afford to buy new equipment, so there's always a tractor valve needing replacement or a milking machine breaking down. Fact is, for the longest time, I didn't know how we were going to afford to send Luke to school. His grades were good, and the school helped him with a remission of tuition. But I took a second mortgage out on the farm. Luke and his mother never knew I did that. They never would have let me do that for them. So the call came in, and I put down my fork, and my daughter-in-law says, "Luke's in trouble. We got to go." I said, "What do you mean he's in trouble? He failed in a class?" I see her fighting to get the words out. That was a doctor over at Memorial Hospital on the phone. He said Luke had partied too hard and was on life support. I watch her and I'm speechless. She tenses up and gives out this odd sound, something between a whoosh and a scream. I never want to hear a sound like that again. I drive us like a fool. A cop stops us and gives us an escort, and the two of us help my daughter-in-law walk because she's collapsing. We get to the emergency. A nurse peels back a sheet, and there's Luke on a gurney. The doctor said Luke's had 3 heart attacks. We go over to our boy, and he starts to move. I mean, move a lot. It's as if he can hear our voices, and he's trying to sit up. "He's getting better," my daughter-in-law said. "He's recovering. I can see it. Oh, thank God." The doctor takes her hand. I wonder how many mothers' hands he's held like that. No, he's not getting better. Only this machine is keeping him breathing. I watch all her hope go out of her. I look that doc straight in the eye. "You saying our Luke is a vegetable?" "I'm saying he's in a vegetative state," the doctor says. "We can keep him like this a few more hours if you have the right insurance. But I'm telling you, the time will come when you have to let us turn off the machine and let him go. I am sorry." That's what we did. My daughter-in-law kissed him for the last time. I held both his hands. We told Luke we loved him. Not long after, I addressed the doctor. "Is he gone?" I asked. The doctor wiped a tear. I'm sure he was thinking of his own grandson in a fix that moment. "He's gone." That's when I noticed Luke had writing on his legs. "What's that?" I asked the doctor. The kids are always scrawling on each other with markers when someone passes out. We see it all the time. My daughter-in-law lifted the hospital gown and saw the crude and rude words written there. "Didn't they like him?" she said. "Didn't they even like him?" I tried to tell her they were just kids being kids, but she wasn't going to have any of it. "Luke would never have done that to them, would he?" she asked me. I didn't answer. Now that Luke is gone, I have to figure out how to pay the hospital stay and the funeral home. Then there's the doctor bill for my daughter-in-law so she could be sedated to attend the funeral. We're talking thousands I don't have. I may have to sell off the farm equipment. I've been to auctions where my neighbors had to sell what they had to make ends meet. Now it looks like that'll happen to me. Luke always loved his coins. Every time he got change, he would look at the date to see if he had a special old coin. One day he and his mom went shopping when he was 5, and he asked if she could give him some pennies. He takes them and throws them as far as he can. What did you do that for, Luke, she says. Well, Mom, someone has to put down lucky pennies for people to find. I can't believe Luke kept this toy fishing rod. I used to take him to the lake to catch panfish. At 14, he told me he didn't want to go anymore. I thought it was a phase and asked him again. No, he said, Grandpa, I'm through tricking fish into committing suicide. Luke thought he was disappointing me, but I was proud of him for thinking for himself. Why didn't you think for yourself that night, Luke? It was real hard for me to talk to those ball players at the wake. I wanted to wring their necks instead of shaking their hands. But I saw the horror in their faces as they knelt by the coffin to show respect. They understood they would have to live with what they did the rest of their lives. The coach gave me a varsity letter jacket with Luke's name on it. I balked for a second and almost pushed it away, but then I took it. I knew how much becoming a teammate meant to Luke. He wore that jacket in the coffin when we buried him. The newspaper today said the police may press charges against the guys that furnished the rookies with alcohol. Luke wouldn't have wanted that. No, Luke wouldn't have wanted that at all, to see his friends in jail. I read that one band member in Florida got a 6-year prison sentence for manslaughter after he helped beat a guy up in another foolish hazing ritual on a bus. 6 years is a long time for a young man to pay for bad judgment. The judge said that guilty party could have been sentenced to 22 years in prison. Don't those kids think of that when they get caught up in group mentality? But maybe I can talk to the boys, then talk to the police about making a deal to keep them out of jail. Or if they do serve hard time, maybe I can help them come back and start their lives over again. Luke said the reason he wanted to join this ball team was that the guys were so involved in community service. He sent me a picture of a fundraiser for a charity they were doing with kids in a children's hospital. It looked like they were having a lot of fun. Today I found Luke's journal. I bought it for his high school graduation. I never opened it when Luke was alive. It said, I will never be like Kurt Cobain and Heath Ledger and die so young. I love life too much. That will never happen to me. I love life too much. Was it so important to him that he impressed his new friends? That boy was always collecting quotations. I wrote down a few of them from the book. You may never know what results come from your action, but if you do nothing, there will be no result. Mahatma Gandhi. All that is necessary for the triumph of evil is that good men do nothing. Edmund Burke. How wonderful it is that nobody need wait a single moment before improving the world. Anne Frank. My daughter needs to read that journal. I can't bring Luke back. The boys can't either. But maybe I can help those kids do something positive to honor his name. Maybe even one of the boys will speak out and say that hazing not only brings dishonor to the human spirit, but it can break a rookie or a pledge, destroy a family. It destroyed mine. Hard to believe that now I am the end of our family's line. I sure can't do anything for anyone, locking myself up here in Luke's room and playing with memories. You'd think I'd sit down and cry, but the pain is buried too deep. Now I understand my father. He once was happy-go-lucky. After Ruth's death, he never smiled. He blamed himself for not dropping the pitchfork and catching her. I also read some of the recruiting materials that coach sent to Luke. Almost every other line talked about sportsmanship and values and loving your teammates, but holding them accountable. I didn't see a word in there about drinking yourself stupid. Yeah, I think I will visit the school and talk with the coach. The coach said something about starting a scholarship in Luke's name. Maybe I can help transform that team. Maybe make this a chance for them to show me Luke didn't make a mistake in wanting their company. Here's the journal again. Martin Luther King Jr. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that. We must develop and maintain the capacity to forgive. He who is devoid of the power to forgive is devoid of the power to love. There is good in the worst of us and evil in the best of us. When we discover this, we are less prone to hate our enemies. Here's another. Take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Take the first step in faith. You don't have to see the whole staircase. Just take the first step. Yes, I like that one for Luke Stone. I'll pay that stone carver another visit. Maybe I need to admit that if Luke had survived that night, he might have put another rookie through that same initiation and broken some other family's heart. Perhaps he might have giggled as he wrote on another passed out boy with a colored marker. I don't see how it's going to help me live the rest of my life hating them. I can't stay bitter. I can't be like my own father. If I can forgive them, maybe someday they can forgive themselves. I think I'll box Luke's weights up and take them over to the ball players. Those boys I saw at the funeral home look kind of puny. I'll bet I can lift 10 pounds more than any of them. And I'll take Tramp with me and give him to the boys. He won't live long if he keeps draping himself over Luke's grave like he's doing. I bet those boys miss him. I know he misses them. Yeah, I bet those boys miss him. Cut. Okay. What'd you think, Mike?
Wow, that was incredible. Let's do some Q&A here. This is really, really powerful for me. Obviously, yeah, I'm a father, first and foremost. I'm also a husband, but obviously my kids are very, very important to me. I have a 15-year-old son and I have a 13-year-old daughter. And I think that's probably one of the reasons why I got into working with students all across the country, is to make sure that my kids come home in one piece, no matter what organization they join. So this really kind of hit home for me. And you start thinking about your role and responsibility as a parent or a grandparent in this particular case. I guess the first question that I have is, how much of these lines came from your actual interviews with families versus stuff that you just kind of put together?
Yeah, sadly, for their own privacy, I won't attribute it to a specific person, but many, at least 7 parents that were in there. And they referred to very specific deaths that I investigated over time. And it wasn't like being a journalist covering city court or police. You're emotionally involved when you get into a story, sit in the living room, look at the scrapbook young man being an altar boy, and hearing the tales from his grandfather, aunts. I wish I could transport the people in our audiences, the young men and women, into that room at that moment for that emotional connection. to see just what gets lost when a life is lost.
Yeah, well, you did certainly a wonderful job in putting together the play because you felt all of those stories, even though you didn't get a chance to meet them in person. I think it came through in the lines. One of the things that struck me was that guilt that the grandfather was feeling, saying that he should have raised Luke as I was reared. And it reminds me a lot of the guilt that's felt by family and friends after a suicide, for example, of a college student. You know, that guilt of saying, well, I should have seen the signs, right? I should have interjected somehow. I should have done things differently. And how these family and friends often live a lifetime with those same questions, saying that I should have done more. And it never goes away. I mean, that's something that they feel forever, right?
Really, it really, really is. And I've seen fathers, without mentioning them, two of them die so shortly after their sons died. One was smoking himself uh, into a grave. When I sat at the table with him, he would have 2 or 3 cigarettes going at the same time,
Mhm.
just out of nervous energy. And again, the quotes that he said went into this play. I don't want to identify for their own privacy, the people, but you can probably tell that those lines were not exactly created. They were said.
Right.
And that's what made it so powerful for me.
Yeah. You also brought in faith as well. You said, how could God let this happen? And I think anytime that we lose someone before they should have gone, then that's kind of what we're left with, is to start questioning our faith and questioning God and saying, you know, how could God let this happen? Parents burying their children is completely against all the norms that we have. But I think it's especially painful when something like this was preventable. It makes the whole situation so much worse.
Going to that church and going to the funerals uh, becomes so hard. And they're doing it for their child at that point, maybe not for themselves, because they are questioning their own lives, their faith, uh, their love for God at that point. Hopefully, they'll be able to come back from that over years, but those moments in church right after a death are difficult. And then you have to imagine, well, for example, the death of a band leader at Florida A&M, and who is escorting the casket along with a horse-drawn team? The band members. And the ball players are coming after a death of a lacrosse player at Western Illinois. The fraternity members are coming along with an advisor after the death of a fraternity member. These are difficult moments. So the line in the play said he wanted to wring their necks, not wring their hands when they approached him.
Mhm.
That also came from a parent.
Yeah, that funeral scene was very powerful. You know, in these situations, nobody ever intends for a death to occur. It's those unintended consequences that happen, and it's usually involving alcohol, as we both know all too well. Perhaps that scene that you've painted, it makes the students think a little bit more about those unintended consequences, and maybe that gives them pause the next time they see a situation like that play out in real life.
Yeah, and for them to know that they are not invincible, they're not invulnerable. And as we said in the play, someone's inexperience with alcohol can be fatal. Alcohol is a poison, essentially, and you have to accept that. You
That was
wouldn't
one
put
of the lines in the play, drinking yourself stupid. And I wonder often, you know, when we look at our calendar, whether it be the sports team or whether it be a fraternity or sorority, what does it really say about our organization? If we were to actually map out everything that we do for an entire year in a planner, what does it say about our organization? And if there is too much focus on alcohol, then you know you start to wonder: are we really in line with who we're supposed to be? In the case of fraternities and sororities, are we really in line with our founders and what they had imagined for our organization over 100 years ago? And are we still built on those same values that they had intended, or did we somewhere along the line get off track a little bit?
you know, you can't be a moral person and live with that morality 362 days, and then 3 days depart from it and have a loss like this. Because I think what's sad about this play for me, because I've interviewed the hazers, is that the deceased boy and the family aren't the only ones suffering from now on. There's good kids who become men who must be looking at their own children years later and thinking about a Chuck Stenzel at Alfred or a Nick Hobbin, lacrosse player at Western Illinois, and that they should be around with their children at this time.
Yeah. I'm sure that people watching the play, and maybe if they're not really familiar with hazing, whether it be in athletics or the band or fraternities and sororities, they might wonder, why would such a kid go through all of that? The reality is that the need to belong is so strong in so many cases. It's almost like oxygen for these members. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's been so difficult to eliminate hazing. And I think it's up to men like you and I and many other men and women in our industry that are out there battling hazing on a daily basis. We need to empower the students to stand up for each other. We have to give them alternatives that are not hazing in terms of membership in these organizations. We have to encourage them to report it, and we have to make sure that the administrators, the alumni, the advisors all know what to do with that information once it is reported. And then ultimately, we have to prosecute those that are found guilty of hazing. I think these are all things that are really necessary if we're finally going to reach our goal and eliminate it from our culture, much as we've already been able to eliminate alcohol, for example, while driving. I think, you and I would agree that that's not something that is acceptable today, that, with the inventions of Lyft and Uber and other ways to get around, it's just not acceptable to get into a car and drive. After drinking, we have to do the same exact thing with hazing.
And it has to be done, and it has to be the undergraduates that fuel that movement.
Yeah.
Because we're an organization, and that includes sports teams, fraternities, sororities, band, on and on.
Yeah. Well, you've done fantastic work today. I really appreciate this recording. I think it's going to be viewed many, many times over and over again. And hopefully that we've done some good here today in getting that message out to the masses. And I think it's applicable to certainly the sports teams, but I can easily see how you can make the jump to fraternities and sororities, the band, and other student organizations. So thank you so much for sharing that with us today, Hank. I really appreciate that.
Thanks, Mike. Thanks for the great questions.
Of course.
Your comments about your children. I think people heard that. Take care.
Very good. Thanks so much, Hank. Take care.